This is Kickin and Streamin podcast. Here are your hosts, Graham and Jocelyn.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Kickin and Streamin podcast. My name is Graham, and with me today, of course, is the very fantastic Jojo, a co-host like no other. Hello, Jojo.
Howdy do.
Jojo, I live for these weekly howdy do's. I actually like to even edit, return a bit more to the howdy do's. If I could just like trick it and make it, how do you do? But I know that would sound weird, so I don't do that. So, Jojo, how you been?
I've been good. How about you?
It's been an interesting week, but hey, the most important thing is that we're here today. We are talking about Netflix's The History of Swear Words. Another suggestion by you, Jojo.
I'm just full of brilliant ideas.
Yeah, man. When you suggested it, I'm like, okay, but this could be a good episode, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it. If it had been full on comedy, I don't think it would have been something that we would have necessarily wanted to talk about together. But since it goes into the, as you said, the taboos and the history of swear words, so it tells you in a very entertaining manner, but it's also very educational too. So I think it's the kind of thing that we could get a good conversation out of. Very
well then. So to start, I'm going to ask you, of course, to do your magic and tell our audience a bit more about the history of swear words, which obviously, there it is in the title.
It does what it says on the tin.
So how does it go? What happens there?
So it's a documentary series, a comedy documentary series that talks about many common swear words that are used in the English language. It's hosted by Nicolas Cage, and it has quite a few different comedians and entertainers who talking about their own use of the swear words, their interpretations of the swear words. And then there's also a panel of experts that they have that come on to talk about each swear and its either history, its etymology, its cultural repercussions, its cultural meanings, its evolution, and it's a not a very long, particularly long series, but I found it extremely entertaining and, as I said, also very educational because there were things that I thought I knew about swear words that I didn't know either the correct thing or I didn't know at all. So I learned things from this, and I like the idea too of it because I don't know how often people think about the history behind a word when they use it. So I kind of hope that this is like a comical way of people to dip their toes into the idea of the history of words and the importance of the history of words and where they come from. And maybe a way for them to say, what does this word actually mean? Where did it actually come from? And not necessarily a swear, or maybe a different swear, whatever. But just the idea to kind of get it in people's heads thinking about the history of words. Because to me, that's just a totally fascinating subject, not dry at all, and very important too if it's going to be a word that you use in your everyday language.
Yeah, we have seldom not realized that words that we use today may have become deconstructed into what they are today, and therefore is hard to actually find meanings to it other than, I don't know what it means, but it's good to use it as a swear word. And so what this documentary does is that it puts a lot of it into context. And I like the fact that they use comedians to talk about the way they contextualize those swear words, the way that they use it in what occasions and whatnot. And then they bring linguists and lexicologists to sort of like do that deconstruction and present us with the logic and the story behind it. So I thought that was incredibly interesting.
Yeah, there was the term for one person says something and then two people hear the something that the person said and they each take something completely different away from it because of their background, because of their understanding, because of their history. It was interesting hearing the very very erudite people talking about the kind of thing that, if I say the word damn, to some people that means one thing. To some other people, they're horribly offended by it. To some people, it doesn't mean anything at all. But it's just the difference between those two completely different people. I thought that was a really interesting, and not just in the context of swearing, but in the context of everyday speech.
Yeah, and we've always, I think, for different reasons, we've always talked about the power of some words and in the way that people who have been victimized by those words take it back, take the power off of it, and basically recycle it to use it as terms of endearment or as something that they own, right? And we're going to go into that a little bit, but I thought this was probably the greatest or best explanation for people who don't understand, because one of the things I've seen a lot is that you see people who have never been called a word complaining that this is so confusing. I don't know what to call you because everything now is so offensive. You see what I mean? Like the whole idea of my grandparents called you this. I should be able to call you that. In fact, you and your friends called yourselves that. So I think we had this conversation before about someone who was telling me that they were nervous and confused about when and how to approach a Black person and call them either African American or Black. And my answer to that was, how about you call them whatever they tell you they feel better being called? Do you know what I mean? So it's as simple as that. Because, the idea is, and it's the same thing with the he, she, they, all of those nouns, right? Like, look, if a trans person or a non-binary gender non-binary person tells you, I don't want to be called a he or a she, just fucking comply to that, and that's it.
Right.
And if you're in doubt, how, just ask them, how would you prefer to be referred to as, right? And it is as simple as that. Am I oversimplifying this at all, Jojo?
No, I don't think so at all. I think there's a great example of that for people who struggle to understand that in the episode that talks about the word bitch.
Right.
Because that is a word that has, a pretty straightforward etymology, you could say. But, I don't want to be called a bitch by just anybody, like the comedian said. But, like you got friends like, oh, bitch, please. That kind of thing. You've got friends you can say that to. Excuse me. And you can. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that's what everybody should do or anything like that at all. But what I'm saying is that in the context of relationships, there are words and terms that you can use for each other, that it's not okay for someone who isn't part of that relationship to not be able to use. You could say something like as simple as sweetheart or darling, or there are some people who really do not want to be called that other than by someone who is their significant other.
That's right.
And, other people are like, but, what's the big deal? It's a nice term. It's a term of endearment. It's a kind word. Sure, it is. But if they don't want you calling them sweetheart, then don't call them sweetheart. Simple as that.
Just
So
don't do it. Just don't do it and call it a day. Like the whole idea of making an argument for it and like, oh, but just don't. Just
yeah, like, oh, you're such a snowflake. You're so offended. Blah blah blah. It's like, no, it's their personal preference, and it really takes. It costs you $0.
yeah.
It costs you $0 to not use that word. And again, I suppose that there is the and I guess natural inclination with some of us to want to give some people a pass with some things. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong either, because I am not sure how I feel about that. But you have sometimes the older ladies who will call you sweetheart no matter what. This is just an example.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that's the culture. That's what they did back then. I'm not really using that in terms of negative words to say, but I'm just talking about in the terms of the way our human brain works. We do have this, I think, something in us that wants to be like, I want to try to understand. This makes me uncomfortable. I want to try to give you a pass because I know of your culture, your background, your age, whatever.
I think it's the most important thing about the reason why people should travel more. The more you can get to know other cultures. And when I say that, I don't mean it in that, you have to travel the world. There are 50 states in this country. And this country, despite what others would like you to believe, is one of the most culturally diverse countries. The truth of the matter is, you can learn a lot from other people and their backgrounds if you are willing to listen. One, and the second thing is if you are willing to meet them halfway. And so. For me, when I see somebody railing against political correctness, the first thing that comes to my head, these motherfuckers are racist. And would love for shit to be still in the same way they were in the 1950s.
Yep. Or a misogynist, or lots of other ist words that are not good. But yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think the political correctness has come to mean something entirely different than, speaking of the evolution of words, but has come to mean something entirely different than what the original intent behind it was. To me, it just means doing your best to not offend somebody's culture, somebody's feelings, somebody's upbringing, and also trying to be just a regular, decent human being and learn from things. As you said, listen to people and be like, oh, I never in a million years thought, because of my upbringing, that could be offensive to somebody. But now that you say that, I understand that could definitely be offensive. So I'm sorry, and I won't use it in that way. To me, that's the meaning of political correctness. But I think that it's been sort of skewed by the people who want to be able to say whatever they want to be able to say because they're ists in whatever it may be. I think it's been skewed to be have more of a negative connotation, which is a shame.
I'm going to talk about a bit of a controversy in the world of soccer that just happened. And I know it's I do that a lot, but soccer is the main sport that I follow. So, but I think it fits the perfect example here. In Latin America, Jojo, you know that there are different connotations for the word negro, but negro, which is how it's said and pronounced in Spanish. And so, Uruguayan player named Edinson Cavani, he plays for Manchester United in England, had a fantastic day on his game. He scored 2 late goals and won the game for his team. And somebody on his social media thread congratulated him. And the whole thing was in Spanish. Hey, congratulations, you stepped up and did your thing and blah, blah, blah. We're very proud. And Cavani's answer to this guy was, gracias, negro, right? That, for somebody like me who was raised in a Spanish-speaking country, for me, that's a term of endearment, especially when I've congratulated someone for having done a great job.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
and to be honest with you, like, you don't necessarily have to be a dark-skinned Spanish-speaking person in certain countries for you to be called negro, because it's it's a way of people calling you my dear, love, my good friend, whatever you want to make of it. Do you know what I mean? So Edinson Cavani really wasn't trying to be offensive to this person. He was connecting through culture, through his own culture, to call this person someone who he holds dear. Having said that, a lot of people who are not from the Latin culture decided to make a fuss about it. And the league, which is an English league that does not understand nothing about the Spanish culture and the language in itself, fucking ban him for 3 days, for 3 games, and fined him because the term that he used was considered racist in accordance to the league. So that created a huge controversy that should have never happened, you know. But again, that's not to say that the same people who call you negro as a term of endearment in Spanish could not turn around and use it as a way of insulting you. It's the same thing with every word. Like, as you said, we were talking about the whole bitch thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. It's just a matter of connotation, tone, circumstances in which those words are being used.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Language is so much more than just words, in my opinion. Language is so much more than just hi, how are you? It's as you said, it's inflection, it's cadence, it's so many different things. Excuse me. It's how often you clear your throat. But I guess my question also would be, the person that he said that to, did they have an issue with it? Were they like, oh, how dare you call me that? Or
no, not at all.
So it was totally a decision by people who were outside of the relationship.
Exactly. But even though I understand that this is much ado about nothing, the league was actually thinking about a greater responsibility in terms of, we don't want this to become normalized among people who do not understand the cultural background of this. And so they thought they were nipping that in the butt, and you have to understand that. Am I wrong in that assertion? I mean, I understand that the league is sort of like out of their league, no pun intended, in meddling in an issue that they don't culturally have the background to understand. But I also understand the overreaction in that we don't want this to become normalized and start being used, for people who are not part of that culture to start using it just because it sounded cool and we allowed Cavani to use it. It is. Wouldn't you think that there's a point there?
Yes. I can see both sides of that coin. I can see that with the relationship between the two people and the background and the culture between the two of them, that was nothing. But if you're taking a worldview and you're on the world stage, which they are, then you have to be able to have that sort of worldview to say, this is a word that could be used negatively, and we don't want people to think it's okay to use that. So I see where I think I can see what the league was trying to do. Sounds like maybe they handled it a little poorly.
Exactly.
It could have definitely been handled differently, maybe privately, but I understand what they were trying to do.
All right. So, Jojo, let me ask you this then. Tell me the words that you actually, were most interesting to you to find out about.
I think the origin and the history of the word fuck was very, very interesting, because I had not heard. I had heard many different things about it and hadn't really done much real research on my own. So it was interesting to know that it was originally from a word that meant to strike, to hit somebody. So I found that interesting, and the experts who were talking about it too linguistically, and the actual alliteration of the word fuck, it's just so cathartic. It's such a good word. It's such a perfect word to encapsulate so many feelings.
Yep. Yeah.
Good ones, bad ones, middle ones. It's like, and the fact that you can use, it's such a diverse word, and that you can use it for so many different things. You can add so many tenses and make it such a different word that it's just it was the very first word that was covered in the series, and I found it to be one of the most interesting. So there was that one, and then the other one was pussy, which was not.
That one was interesting, wasn't it?
Yes, very, very interesting. Yeah. Like I did not know some of it. Some of it I had read before, and kind of the take back that's trying to happen with that word too is interesting. So I thought that was very fascinating. Also, the fact that it's so taboo.
Yeah.
And I had never really thought of it that way. So I that too, to me, I was like, I kind of thought, because they were, I'm going to get, blue here, but I felt like they were comparing it as being almost on the same level as the word cunt in terms of offensiveness, which surprised me, because I'd never thought of it that way. So that was a lesson for me.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that, much like you, I had heard a lot of different versions of the origin of fuck. And I think it might well be the one curse word that everybody seemed to have tried to find an origin to. And the one explanation, which turns out that it's actually not true at all, that seemed to have stuck, and I learned about that in the seminary, was the whole, fornicating under the consent of the king and shit like that, which seemed like really so plausible. But it turns out the whole story doesn't pan out, because why the fuck would the king need to give you your consent to fornicate, to give you consent to fornicate? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
And then it turns out that it's actually a Dutch word, and yes, to strike, which then is interesting, because when you get struck, the first thing that comes to mind is fuck. Yes. Isn't it? But at the same time, when somebody gets struck, this motherfucker got fucked up.
He got fucked up, yes.
Eh?
Yes. Yes,
so we've been utilizing this word etymologically, even though we didn't know that.
Right, exactly. We feel pain, and that's the first thing that comes into your head, right? You hit your foot, you fall, or somebody hits you, or whatever. You think fuck. So maybe it's one of those words that just came out of the human consciousness.
Yes, that is an amazing thing. I loved it, and I love that they led with it. It was the very first episode. But there were a load of these words that I was never curious about until I came across this show. right? So, shit, for example, was another one.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, has anybody ever wondered for real the origin of shit? Because to me, like, I thought it was a way that in English you say excrement, right?
Right.
But little did I know that there's an entire history to it. And I think the crazy thing is that it actually evolved into becoming a swear word, but was never intended for that. And that seems to be the common theme here, that words start innocently until somebody insert a meaning or gave it a certain amount of power that it should not have, and all of a sudden, boom, here we have a swear word.
Yes. Yes. My own personal observation was that people who don't typically curse or cuss, when they do, it always seems like they come out with shit. Which I just find amusing, because it's like, of all the great pantheon of words, and you're gonna cuss in front of somebody. Your brain has made this conscious decision. I don't cuss, but I'm gonna cuss in front of somebody. To me, they always chose the word shit, and I always wondered why. Like, I guess because maybe it's a little worse than damn, but not as bad as fuck. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like right in between, isn't it?
It's right in the middle. But I always wondered that, like, what is this connection with that? But that's a totally my own observation. That's not scientific in the slightest.
It was also interesting to see that there, damned, for instance, is the only word that originated to mean what it meant, what it still means, but from its origin, it was always considered to be an iffy word. Isn't that weird?
Yes. That it's really one of the few that has a very religious connotation, and a very a very, very serious connotation. Like, it has always been a word that you take seriously. Like, it has always been, not, I don't know necessarily a taboo word, but one that is something that you don't just say lightly.
Yeah. And so the crazy thing for me is that even though we call swear words cursing, the one that is actually a curse is them, because it always follows, even in Spanish or in any Neo-Latin language, when you talk about damnation, we know that you are cursing somebody.
Yeah, I agree that as much as language changes and evolves, and as much as words change and evolve, that there are some that hold on to their core meaning, that have always meant what they've always meant, and they may never change. And I think that's really, really interesting to know that you can use a word today that hundreds and hundreds of years ago someone would know exactly what you meant and be like, oh Lord. She's going to hell and so am I.
Yes.
But I think the other episode that I thought was interesting too, that was the use of the word dick, which
Yes.
I never really considered a swear word.
Yeah.
So I did not consider. I knew it wasn't a polite word. I mean, that not something you'd maybe typically use in a business meeting. Stop being a dick. Right.
But being a dick.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, it's I never thought of it as an actual swear word. So, but I also found that one interesting in that it, if I'm remembering correctly, started as a name and was always a name up until relatively very recently in terms of language, and how somebody's name becomes a swear word. That's fascinating to me, that whole process of how that can happen.
I can only imagine that there was a Richard that was really, really, really a bad motherfucker. And somebody decided, you know what? Anybody who's as bad as this Richard is going to be also nicknamed a dick. And so, because Richard was dicking around, so anyone who dicked around was a dick too.
Yep.
But it is amazing that it actually started as a nickname. Yeah.
Yep. I thought that was
And the other thing that actually I found interesting and I never thought about is that anyone who was born, I want to say maybe since from the 60s on, and is named Richard, actually is a Rick or a Ricky. Like no longer have people, nicknamed their Richards dicks.
no.
Right?
No. They yeah, there might be a Rich or something like that, but
Yeah.
you're not going to meet a younger Dick. I mean, you'll meet a younger Dick, but his name is not going to be Dick.
Do you know what? This is going to be our audiogram for the week. You're not gonna make a younger Dick. The history of swear word. You're not gonna make a younger. That is a funny thing. So I think what we've learned from this show, and I would like to hear what you would say about that, is that most of it is a question of connotation, is a question of circumstances, is a question of intent. Because we've always said, like, while my mother or my father can call me a boy, nobody else can call me a boy because I'm not a boy. As simple as that. While my Spanish-speaking friend can call me, hey, ¿cómo estás, mi negro? Nobody else can call me negro because I don't know you like that, motherfucker. So I think, if I remember correctly, it was Scalia who said, no one really knows what a swear word is, but when you hear it, you know. And I think that's entirely the case. That is the best definition of a swear word, isn't it, Georgia?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like it's once you hear it, and you know that it's being used as a swear, or in the case as a slur towards you. You will know. You might not know the word, but if somebody says it to you and the intent is there, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, let's go around. I don't know what that means, but let's take this outside and
Exactly. You want to take this
that way. Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I don't know what that means, but I felt whatever you were projecting with that word.
Exactly.
So yeah, I completely agree. And language is so much more than just words. Words are, of course, incredibly important, and words are one of the things that separate us, in terms of consciousness, one could say, from animals. But the intent behind them, the way we say them, what we say and how we say it, is just as important as the actual word itself.
And that is not to say that you may have meant well when you said something, and that it cannot be misconstrued. So it is important.
Absolutely.
It's important to understand that,
Absolutely.
yes, while there's more to word than what words mean, you don't go around saying words without saying certain words, calling people a certain name without their consent, without having a relationship as a basis for it.
Yes, exactly. Very, very true. And it's, just because, and if you meant well by something and you ended up offending someone, don't have the knee-jerk reaction of, well, you're an idiot, because that's not how I meant it. We need to have, I think, more reactions in the sense of, let me try to understand what I said or how I said it that made it offensive. And it may just be the case that the person is being unreasonable. Of course, we know there are unreasonable people in the world, but just take it as an opportunity to pause and say, let me try to think about how I'm presenting myself with my speech.
For instance, because of my interaction with Britain, the time that I lived there, one of the words that I use a lot is love, right? And I don't mean anything by that at all. Most of my interaction in English before moving to the US was with British people. And there's a lot of shit that I said before that Americans were like, what? What the? No, we don't say that. you know, no, we don't say that, And so I had to, relearn all of that. But I still say love. I still call a lot of people love. And sometimes I can see the reaction like, love, hey man, you all right, love? Like, dude, no, that's not what I meant. But once if it escapes me, once I see the reaction, I backtrack and I know that, okay, this is not,
Yeah, that's, I mean, it could, speaking internationally, you can also say regionally here in the United States. I was, my father had been in the military, so he was very much a yes ma'am, yes sir type person, even though we didn't live technically in the South. But when I started working in Maryland, women especially would get incredibly offended if you called them ma'am.
Oh yeah.
Very, very offended. So I had to adapt and realize that in this state, when I'm working, I can't just assume that it's okay to call a woman ma'am, because she may come across the desk at me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess all of that just to say that, there's so many words that have these regional meanings that if you look them up in the dictionary, you can say, well, this is exactly what it means. It's a respectful term for a female. But if someone is not taking it that way and they see it as a sign of disrespect, then you have to respect that. You can't just say you're being ridiculous or you're being silly. You just have to go, okay, that's the way you feel. That is your upbringing. I'm not going to call you ma'am. But again, it's a whole background cultural thing that we're all just trying to, I guess, navigate, and those of us who want to cause as little harm as we bumble through this world as we can are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and so here's what we're going to do. We highly recommend these. How many episodes was it? 8? Actually, it was 6. I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And each one of them are about 20 minutes. They're funny. Nick Cage does a fantastic job as a host and as a moderator, or whatever you want to call him.
Yes.
He can't help but being weird, isn't he?
He was more entertaining than I expected.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw it was Nick Cage, I was like, because I'm no hate or disrespect to Mr. Cage, but every so often he's a little out there, and he was definitely out there with this, but he was very entertaining.
Yeah, he was out there, that's for sure, but entertaining more than he was out there. You're right, and so it was enjoyable to watch. And there's a couple of comedians there that I've never found funny, but that's okay. I don't think London Hughes is funny, so I couldn't find her funny. Zainab, I don't remember her last name.
Johnson?
She's funny. What was her last name?
Johnson?
Zainab Johnson. You remember we actually liked her in Upload.
Yes.
She's like, she brought the funny.
Yes.
And, that Australian dude, what's his name? He's a good stand-up comedian, but I don't think I don't think outside of stand-up he can be funny. Is it me?
No. There are definitely comedians that beyond stand-up, they just don't have the whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of have the same thing with Sarah Silverman. I just, and she's very talented, but I don't have the same sense of humor to find her very funny. I mean, I do sometimes, and I find some of her characters very funny, but her stand-up is a little too painful for me.
Yeah, that's right. Sarah Silverman can be a bit too punchy with her stand-up.
She's incredibly talented, and I think she's extremely intelligent. Just something about her humor doesn't make me laugh.
Yeah, she's definitely, she has a huge IQ. But you're right.
Yes.
But again, very good show, JJ. What would you rate that?
I think probably a 3. Good solid 3.
Yeah, I'll give it a 3.5.
3.5. Okay.
Yeah, but more so because it wasn't only comedians talking about it, but they brought in the experts, and the experts really put everything into context for us. You tell us what you think. You can find us online. We have our website, of course, kickingandstreamingpodcast.com, but also you will find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter if you look for Kickin and Streamin. You can find Jocelyn on Instagram only as
Jocelyn Podcast.
And as for me, you'll find me as Mr. Putzeta, MRPUZZETTA, MRPUZZETTA, on Instagram, on Facebook, and also on Twitter. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Kickin and Streamin Podcast. If you found value in our content, please subscribe and share. We would also be delighted to hear what you think of this podcast. So please rate us by writing a quick review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on all major social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Join the conversation happening today on our Facebook group.